Hi everyone, I hope you were well. Obviously, you were a little surprised by that extra week you had. I hope you used it to start thinking about your projects, and I have heard from one person about a project, but on October 3rd, which is next week, it's time to submit an idea for your paper and a draft bibliography. And it's a challenge to narrow it down to something that can be done profitably in a short. I know the length of it doesn't seem short to you, but as you get on in your studies, this might very well seem like a short paper. There will be another longer break coming up so soon, so make sure you check the syllabus to see what dates things are due and what readings are coming up. The readings for this coming week are extensive, and while I was preparing for the unit, it made me wonder what your own experience has been of participating in the Sacred Triduum. My own experience, I grew up in the 50s, so I have a limited experience, but some of the Triduum in its olden times. Mostly, I remember the experimental rite, and when it was changed in 1955. But I remember on Holy Thursday there being 40 hours of devotion, and we had this 40-hour procession on Holy Thursday morning. And so that would have been when I was, in the first, second, or third grade. I remember we wore green wreaths on our heads, vines of some sort on our heads, and white dresses. Probably our first communion dresses or something. But mostly I remember being in the choir and being taught, really, about these changes in the liturgy. Now, when you read about this history, it's going to seem amazing to you how odd it is that things progressed to not having all of the sacred rituals that we have, especially about the Easter Vigil. But it's an enlightenment. So actually I put on the message board, or the discussion board, a question for asking you what has been your personal experience of the Sacred Triduum. Now, it could be that none of you has ever participated in the Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday Triduum. Or others of you, especially a few of you, are involved in preparing people to receive the full initiation through the rite of Christian initiation of adults. You might have a different perspective on this. We also come from several different countries, as well as being from several different age groups. But again, it's supposed to be not out of anything that you've learned, but just out of your personal experience. How active have you been in the Sacred Triduum, and what has been your experience of it? So that's the first question on the discussion board, as kind of a prelude to this reading, although I realize you might have seen the length of the reading and already started doing some of the reading yourselves, which is absolutely fine, absolutely fine. So one thing to be aware of as you read Adam's book, especially in this 5th chapter, he keeps referring to the new missal. And you and I, in our heads, might have, the 2013 missal in your minds, that this is what is meant by the new missal. But it's not. It's the missal that was approved after Vatican Council II and after things settled down. So it dates from about 1975 as what he's referring to. So we've come a far way from them. But every time he says the new missal, you have to say, Oh no, not that. Not this new missal. The new missal right after Vatican Council II. So that's really important. It's hard. It's very hard to come by a 1939 missal, which was the first missals that were published in this country. I know your grandparents might talk as though they were carrying that missal to church with them all the time, and they were. But really, they weren't available to people in this country until 1939. And early in the 20th century in Europe, especially Belgium, there was an edition published in 1914 for the people. And the missal was further popularized by a man, a priest from the Brooklyn Diocese, Father Stedman, who later became a Monsignor. And he made these very inexpensive, small missals available to people, mostly for soldiers that they could take to war with them, or they could take into the field with them and put it in their pocket, the pocket missal. There were several different editions of that. And really, he's the one who popularized people carrying a missal to church with them. But the 1939 missal, I bought one at a used theological bookstore when I was working on my Father Reinhold biography, because he did a lot of writing. He did a whole series of columns in the Los Angeles diocesan newspaper explaining the liturgical year to people and going through each of the feasts and explaining things in the ways people could understand, and using some of the prayers as well. But it wasn't the liturgy that was of my day, and so I had to get a 1939 missal, and didn't come by it inexpensively, but it's a treasure to have, and it certainly helped me in my work understanding what he was referring to and appreciating how far we've come since then. But the other thing is, it has so much description in it. It's really a very fine missal. But you might find one in the library, or some of you are living in convents. You might find somebody there that has a pre-1955 missal around. Just on the off chance. In my religious life, the sisters came to know that I was interested in historical research, even in our community. And so I've got a stack of old books that people just, kept feeding me. Old little prayer books or devotionals or things that come from other times. And I've always valued those contributions. So if you come by one of them, or you find it in one of the convent libraries or in a parish library, take a look at it. Now, as you read through, especially Adolphe Adam's book, that's really the most thorough about all of the rituals associated with the Sacred Triduum. Some things might surprise you or enlighten you. First of all, you're going to be very surprised at how long all of this took to develop. And I always tell the undergraduates, Jesus didn't sit the apostles down and say, take out a sheet of paper and this is how we're going to do it. You celebrate this feast, and that's not how the church developed. But I think really, as you read Adam, it might be really surprising to you to see how long it took to develop and how much confusion there's been about what we would call the facts, because what one era is sure, the way things happened, another era finds older documents that disprove that theory. And up until this very day, we're still having discussions about exactly when and how the early church did what and when. And it's likely to go on as long as we do, that's for sure. Another surprising thing might be to you is how difficult it was to come up with the idea of the dating of Easter. you know, of course, that there is this split between the Orthodox, Eastern and Western Christianity with regard to the date of Easter. And sometimes it falls fortuitously together, and other times it doesn't. Most times it doesn't. But just even coming up with the date for Easter in itself might be surprising to you how difficult and arduous that that was to come about. Another thing Adam talks about is the use or the interest in that time for a perpetual calendar. Well, that was an interest in his time. I don't really hear much interest in that in our time. But in the documents of Vatican II, there is a proposal for a fixed calendar. And I put a copy of it in the documents section. So it would have, there wouldn't be these movable feasts. Easter would be at a fixed date. And each month would have a certain number of days in it and weeks, and it would all be organized. And of course, it didn't come out evenly, so there would be some extra celebratory days at different times in the year. But it's called a world calendar, and it might have seemed as though it was something that was talked about a lot in that era, but it kind of died out, and I haven't really heard anything more about it in liturgical circles, and nor in the civil year circles. So that's something else that you might find very interesting as you're reading, and wonder what that is all about. So that's why I put a copy of it in the documents, just to make it easier for you to find. I know you can Google anything, but I thought this might be a little easier for you to find. The Adam book also talks more about Odo Kazel, whom I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, among some of the liturgical heroes of yesteryear. Odo Kazel, he's the one who had developed this mystery theology, and for just about all of his ministerial life, he was chaplain to a Benedictine community of sisters. So he didn't live at the monastery, but he lived with the sisters. And it gave him an opportunity to teach them, but also to do writing himself. Well, he died at Easter, after singing the Lumen Christi with the Easter candle coming in, light of Christ, except he sang it in Latin, of course, Lumen Christi. And after he got to the high altar with the Paschal candle, he had a stroke, and he died during that night. And to theologians, to die at the Easter Vigil, that's it, to sum it all up at the feast of the year. Of course, what better way would a liturgical theologian want to die? Well, it's the custom in Benedictine communities that when any member of the community dies, a short notice is written and sent to all of the monasteries throughout the world. And this is what was sent by Maria Lach at the time of Odo Kazel's death. Having just greeted the light of Christ in a clear voice, and while preparing to celebrate the Paschal Preconium, our beloved Father in Christ, liturgist of the Sacred Mystery and mystagogue Odo Kazel, monk of Maria Lach, having accomplished his Holocaust and passing over with the Lord during the night, entered upon the beatific vision, being himself consummated in perfection by the mysteries of Easter, which he had given to initiates. Thanks be to God. So it's, that's the culmination of an Easter celebration. Of course, it's before. He died in 1948, so that's before we have the restored Easter Vigil liturgy. So as I said before, there's lots of reading in this section, most of it in Adam, but there are the essays by Talley and Johnson? Oh, Bradshaw, right, Paul Bradshaw. Talley and Bradshaw, you will also find illuminating. But you might also find there ideas for what you might want to develop in your paper or project. There's so many symbols that are part of the Easter Vigil and the Sacred Triduum. For example, the washing of the feet at Holy Thursday. It's not without controversy. So in when you're reading Adam, it says that they selected 12 men to wash their feet. Well, the current there's no number now. It doesn't have to be 12. And of course, there's been endless discussion and decisions. It doesn't have to be men either, as the Pope himself has been washing the feet of people each year, not only men. So here you have the highest authority of the Church, making it very clear it doesn't have to be men. But maybe that's something that you want to focus on in your research. Or there have been lots of alternate to the foot washing experiments that have taken place. So I've seen some place where they do hand washing instead of foot washing. Doesn't have the same ring to me, but you know, you could be different. You might have had different experience or imagine it differently. Other places, they have foot washing stations, and people who want to wash feet go there. And one person washes another's feet, and then that person washes the feet of the person behind him, and then that person washes the next person's feet, and so on. And we did that at St. John's one year. I don't remember if it got done any other time, but I do at least remember it from one year. So there's been, and you might find more in your reading, there's been a lot of attempt to make it more meaningful. And the same is true of the veneration of the cross. There's been many different ways in which parishes or people have tried to do that. And if you're going to do a project, thinking in terms of working in a parish, you might decide that you're going to come up with your own proposal and have it backed up with research. So maybe you'll find ideas in this section that you want to work on. That's perfectly fine. Now, if you're not sure or you want to talk about it, you know where to find me. You have my email address. Just have to spell my name correctly. You've got my phone numbers. You can text me. You've got all of that information in the course outline. And you have my office hours, and I'm at the university other times as well. So there are lots of different ways in which you could reach out and talk about what you might want to do your paper about. This week on the discussion board, I have just those two questions besides the usual, are there any questions about this unit? Your Triduum story. And then the other is for you to select 3 elements as you're doing your reading about which you learned the most and had the most impact on you. And again, the same, put your 3 up there. And it doesn't have to be, you know, a long essay, just, you know, 3 brief statements or paragraphs about each of your symbols or whatever stood out for you in the readings, and then respond to others. You're doing that very well on the discussion board. It's very interesting and it's very robust. And then there's the usual question about whether you have any questions about the unit, and that's all there is. Except that next week I would like to know your proposal or draft of bibliography, some things that you're thinking about. And if you put all that in a Word document and email it to me by next Monday, then I can give you some feedback individually on that. We won't do that all together just yet until once everybody's decided on what direction they're doing in their projects and papers. I'll post that so that you can help each other out. If you read something that you think would be helpful to another person, you can direct their attention there, okay? So enjoy your reading. Be patient with Holy Mother Church and how things have developed over the centuries. And probably when you get to this year's, the next Easter cycle, Lent Easter cycle, and really we've only just started discussing this or reading about this, you'll have a deeper appreciation and maybe experience of it all. So enjoy your reading and reach out to find me if you have any problems or issues, okay? Thanks. Bye.